Talonflame is a Pokemon that's had a crazy rise and fall, and honestly rise again. It's a pretty interesting story. In Generation 6, when this thing was introduced, it came with an absolutely broken exclusive ability in Gale Wings, which gave it priority to all of its flying attacks. I absolutely still have nightmares about Swords Dance Priority Brave Birds. However, in Generation 7, this ability was nerfed pretty badly, and now only gives you priority on flying moves if you're at full health, which kind of ruins the whole thing. This nerf hit Talonflame in terms of viability pretty hard, and while it's no longer really used as the offensive monster that it once was, it now finds itself in a pretty interesting defensive utility niche. As a fire flying type that can pop on some heavy duty boots to disregard Stealth Rock, it now functions as a super fast mon that has just enough defensive stats to be the type of guy that can easily fit onto a lot of teams. While the main reason this thing's able to fit the role is because of its good matchup against common threats, it's also largely due to its once forgotten ability option in Flame Body. This gives us a 30% chance to burn in a Pokemon that makes physical contact with us, which works really well in a metagame that's obsessed with U-turn. But apart from that, it gets access to a ton of super useful support moves, like Defog, which is hard to come by these days, Taunt, it's got Tailwind, Will-O-Wisp for when you don't want to rely on Flame Body, or even U-turn for speedy positioning. While I plan to use this bad boy as a nice defensive support, it also comes with some pretty solid built-in stab options in its extremely hard-hitting Brave Bird, along with Flare Blitz, and even trained in max HP, without any attack investment, it can still get great damage due to the sheer power of these moves. So while Talonflame is no longer the scary Gale Wings threat it once was, thank God, it honestly is the type of Pokemon that provides greater value than you'd expect in almost every game you bring it to. Not gonna lie, I still get PTSD looking at Talonflame from those early X and Y days. And while the goat has fallen from what it once was, it's still pretty useful just in different ways. And honestly, just even as an attacker, it's still not that bad. It's the kind of Pokemon that when you put it on a team, I don't really build around this being the highlight, but it puts in work more than I expected to. So today we're showing some love to the Flame, and if that sounds like a fun time to you, consider hitting that subscribe button. I'm actually getting close to 400K these days, and you can help me out. Now, before we jump into the video, I want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, Arena Club. Aside from collecting dubs and battles, I'm also pretty big into collecting graded Pokemon cards. And if you're like me, you should probably hear about how Arena Club is changing the game with their original slab packs and no-fee auctions. Whether you're chasing grails or flipping graded slabs, Arena Club makes it super easy to collect cards that you're into, whether it's sports or Pokemon. Slab packs are a really interesting idea where you can rip a pack for as low as 25 bucks and have a chance to hit on a card that's worth crazy amounts, with every pack having the chance to hit a grail that's worth at least 20 times the price of the pack. Plus, unlike buying regular packs, you're at least guaranteed to get a grade-worthy card. Look, Arena Club's the most trusted name in the game, and they offer full transparency by showing you each of the cards possible to be pulled from each pack, so you know exactly what you're getting into in terms of what's available with the odds of each card. I recently pulled myself a beautiful Black Kyurem EX along with a PSA 10 Crown Zenith Pikachu, and even though I didn't get lucky with the Gold Star Mew Grail, there is still some pretty sick cards. The process is super fun, and I think ideas like this are really cool when they're changing up the hobby. You get the excitement of seeing your pull immediately, and it goes into your personal showroom where you can list it in an auction, trade it, or just straight up get your physical card in the mail. With each slab pack you open, Arena Club makes you an instant offer in cash for your card based on fair market value. You can accept it right on the spot, and it's a great way to get a quick return if you pull something you don't really want. If this sounds interesting to you, right now you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/Haydunn and use code Haydunn. And with that, let's get back into the battle. Alright, so I'm not gonna lie, this first battle is an absolute fight to the bloody end. It gets really interesting. So, as my opponent is gonna lead off with the Galvantula, kind of expected, right? You see the Galvantula from the team preview, Bud's gonna set up some webs, and nothing worse than just getting all sticky. So, I lead off with the young Kmart Gliscor, who is bulky enough with an Eviolite. I can set up some Stealth Rock, and of course, as they do click that sticky web turn 1, it shouldn't be that big of a problem. I do have a Rapid Spinner in the form of the Cryogonal in the back, so at this point, I figure either they stay in and go for an Energy Ball just for chip, or they end up swapping. Regardless, I'm going to click a U-turn. What that's going to do is, as they end up switching, first of all, give me some momentum. I would like to break the Focus Sash on the Galvantula, but the great news is, unless they get rid of my Stealth Rock, that thing's going to come in and just already have its Sash broken. So, as they end up bringing in the Orthworm here, this fella could be a problem, depending on what this thing wants to do. First of all, if it's going to be an Iron Defense Body Press set, either that's kind of fine, or if it's going to go in, it just said Shed Tail, that could also be a little unfortunate. Regardless, though, I'm going to address these sticky webs right from the start. I've got some nonsense that I would like to set up, being like the Conkeldurr in the back, and he relies on speed. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go right into Snowflake. I can rapid spin here because that either baits it into just going for an attack, or they just show me the Shed Tail early. Turns out they are going to click the Iron Head. I know I can take at least one of them, and that, you know, that does hurt if you're a big-ass Icy Snowflake. So I realize, obviously, as I can't really touch the thing, I did my job in getting rid of the rocks, because one thing I was considering is I want to try to get the Conkeldurr going early, right? This is an interesting Conkeldurr set. I do have a video on this bad boy if you're interested. Essentially, what he does is tries to get a Dynamic Punch miss to activate a Blunder Policy, doubling my speed, and then taking advantage of a max power Stomping Tantrum. It's an interesting guy. Now, it turns out as the Orthworm is going to go for the Shed Tail. I was really hoping it just wasn't going to have the Shed Tail. This allows them a nice little momentum switch into the Medicham. Now, one thing you're going to note about this match is it's a big fight for momentum positioning, right? Like, they're able to easily go into this thing, and honestly, I do not really want to take a Zen Headbutt. I'm expecting this to be a Choice Scarf Medicham. Honestly, whenever I see Medicham, first thing in my head is, all right, that buddy's got to be Choice Scarf. So I decided to switch into my biggest kind of physical sponge here, going to be the Gligar. It turns out, though, they go for the Fake Out, which honestly works out pretty nice. That's not only going to reveal, as we see the Life Orb there, it's not choiced, but also that I don't take any damage from that. So fun part is now, while they have a free turn to just go for a Zen Headbutt, it actually ends up missing. And, you know, that's because Gligar is a skinny king. You can't even see the guy, and it's easy to miss. So RNG Lord throws us a bone on that one. We will absolutely accept it, because that allows me to break this thing Substitute. And young Titty Knees over here is kind of in danger, right? Unless it has an Ice Punch, which is very possible. I'm just going to stay in and see if that's what they want to do. It turns out, however, they are going to swap. So now at least we know in the back of our minds, not going to be Choice Scarf Medicham. So that's pretty important knowledge. Now, at this point, I click the U-turn, just thinking even if they stay in, I get some good chip and some positioning to go into whatever I want. Turns out, they bring in big-ass Catfish Whale, and God, do I hate Dondozo. Now, the U-turn is going to reveal the Rocky Helmet chip, which is annoying, but I'm thinking I can at least threaten this thing out with the Cryogonal, with the Freeze Dry. It's going to do some big damage, and generally Dondozo is something I want to try to address early, right? It's going to always be unaware, so it's not a mon that you can really freely set up in front of, just eat on anything. Just knowing that they have Dondozo back there, it's kind of just a big insurance policy. Unaware Dondozo is just one of the best ways to make sure you don't get your ass swept. So as I go for the Freeze Dry here, in comes friggin' Hot Lava Frog, and Heatran is going to take nothing from that. And honestly, Heatran is also a little bit of a problem to the team. The best answer I have for that is going to be something like Gligar if I can get an Earthquake off, if I can potentially set up the Conkeldurr. But first of all, I want to see what this thing's going to do. I'm thinking maybe it sets up Stealth Rock. That would allow me to bring in the Gligar here for free and then threaten with an Earthquake. Sadly, however, they go for the Flash Cannon, and that does just enough for a nice little 2-hit KO for him. That last attack did about 80 damage. Now, at this point, they probably expecting the defensive switch here are going to switch themselves and try to get a position with the Orthworm, likely just to freaking Shed Tail again, because this guy's annoying. Either that, or it's just a free switch into Orthworm expecting the Earthquake. Now, I am reluctant to click Earthquake anytime this Earth-eating fat bastard is around, bro. I can't afford to give this thing more health for free, and the U-turn there is once again going to give me position. And as I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, this generally feels like the time to go into the Conkeldurr, right? Because even though my main plan is to set up with things like Bulk Up, and Dondozo isn't really going to enjoy a Conkeldurr in general. Plus, I can Drain Punch health back. So as I just go for the Drain Punch here, kind of thinking maybe they swap into that Dondozo, they do just stay in. They likely make the over prediction there, and I'm able to take care of the Orthworm, which is great for general momentum on the squad right now, not having to worry about that thing switching into Earthquakes, and just overall not having to worry about freaking Shed Tails is honestly pretty valuable. So now as they decide to bring in the Meganium, kind of the wild card on their squad, right? This is a random ass mon. You never know what it's really going to do. It turns out it is going to go for the Swords Dance. So shout out to Buddy for working with the Swords Dance Meganium. I do respect it. That thing can get a little bit scary if it starts to Trailblaze. Now, as I bulk up myself, they do still have a nice little boost here. They do go for the Trailblaze. And luckily, since Conkeldurr built different, I'm able to take that nicely. And I actually connect on the Dynamic Punch, which is pretty satisfying. Now, again, this is a Blunder Policy Dynamic Punch friggin' Conkeldurr, who is generally supposed to miss the first one, but in that situation, connecting there, being able to take care of the Meganium is pretty satisfying, not gonna lie. So as I'm looking at the freaking Dondozo now, obviously my bulk up is negated with the Unaware ability. I decide to go for that Dynamic Punch. If I connect, I get a Confusion and some pretty big damage on the guy, but also as I miss here, that's going to double my speed. Now, Conkeldur's looking faster than everything they've got. As they go for the liquidation here, that isn't going to do very much at all. Conkeldur's just bulky as hell. And now, I'm not even worried about them slowly chipping me down because I can go ahead and click the Drain Punch here. And while, again, it doesn't matter about my bulk up, it is still going to slowly just allow me to hopefully outlive the thing. Now, the Rocky Helmet doesn't really help. What doesn't help is Buddy goes for the Fissure, connects first try on the one-hit KO move, and absolutely bust my balls. Literally, what the... I did not expect the Fissure. That's insane. That's gotta be the first time I've been fissured in a long time. But, you know, hey, respect for Buddy able to connect there, and now I gotta deal with this freaking Dondozo, who turns out to have Fissure. So here's the thing. I can go into the Latios, and I'm looking at it thinking, I've got some pretty good damage on the guy. If it's gonna have Rest, that could be unfortunate. I just have really good chip on it, though, so I decide Latios has potential to set up in front of this thing. Now, I have been messing around with this Latios a while back. It's pretty fun. Nobody expects it to be a physical attacker. What's actually also great is this draws in the Heatran. Could be something like an Assault Vest Heatran here. At least that's what I'm going to say to myself. I end up clicking the Terra Steel here. That's just because if that Dondozo had something like an Avalanche or any type of coverage against me, this allows me a great spot to pretty freely set up here. And honestly, once Latios gets a Dragon Dance up, obviously the surprise factor of this thing not being a special attacker has worn off. But also, as Heatran comes in here, I do have the Earthquake coverage for it. So as I click the Earthquake, Heatran decides they probably expect that, and unfortunately for me, they're gonna bust out the Terra Grass, and that's, you know, that happens. Terra Grass Heatran is great. Now it obviously doesn't worry about any fire coverage, just because of the fact that it's freaking Flash Fire. And also name a more adorable Terradmon. So now my Earthquake does absolutely nothing. And also now as I'm Steel type, I'm in danger of a Lava Plume. So they've kind of won the matchup here, but somehow I'm able to live the Lava Plume and I don't get burnt, which is about sick as hell. So I'm like, you know what? At this point, I'm +1. The sad news is, while they can just go right into Dondozo here, and just knowing that I have no way to not make contact, I decided to play it safe here just in case they do want to stay in and go. I go for that Zen Headbutt. Turns out they are going to switch back into freaking Dozo, which is annoying. Now, here's the thing, though. Looking at the team that they've got left, as I do connect on the Zen Headbutt here, that is going to not quite be enough to knock out the freaking Dozo, but I put it easily in range to deal with. However, the most important thing about this entire matchup is now looking at what I've got left, it's starting to feel like Talonflame now has the game pretty wide open for it, right? The one thing stopping Talonflame from kind of going crazy there would have been the Heatran, but now being a grass type, it's in danger of Brave Bird. So first, I decide I can go into the Kragonal here. I can basically just outspeed. If they want to switch, something's taking a Freeze Dry. That is going to be able to finish off the Dondozo, and that is a momentum stopper freaking out of the way. So that fat boy is annoying, and now it's gone. So looking at what they've got left, they have 3 Mons, right? First of all, it's going to be the Medicham. They have Galvantula, and then they have the Terra Grassed freaking Heatran. So as they go into the Medicham here, one thing we also know is that it's not Choice Scarf. So we know that Talonflame is going to be able to outspeed it. Plus, being max HP, I know that I can first of all take any attack he wants to go for, but also run the risk of them touching me. They honestly might get flame bodied. Sadly, as they go for that fake out, they do touch me, do not get flame bodied. But even more unfortunate for them is that now Talonflame is able to outspeed. A Brave Bird is able to pick off the Medicham, who could have been a pretty big problem. And now they've just got the 2 Mons left. So sometimes you gotta find the position for the flame to clean things up. And at least hopefully we can make it happen. So now they can go Galvantula. Galvantula is a pretty speedy boy. Not faster than Talonflame, however, because we are out here absolutely zooming with base 126 speed. That's going to allow me to go for the Flare Blitz, and that is going to burn his ass to a crisp. So down goes the Galvantula, and now the final Mon is going to be the freaking Flower Pot Heatran. So this thing is relatively healthy. I think it's just above half. And as it does come in, yeah, it's sitting just above half, but luckily for me, we got the combination of the big damage. I have no attack investment on this Talonflame at all. Just the pure power of its dual stab options in Brave Bird and Flare Blitz. The Brave Bird's going to be able to knock out the Heatran, and that is going to be the end of the game. Honestly, this entire match did not expect Talonflame to pop off, but as soon as that thing busted out the Terra Grass, I was like, hold on a second. Speedy Talonflame might just be able to clean things up, and it does there. And while this thing generally functions more of as like a defensive switch in and try to flame body and burn things, sometimes also you just gotta show off the power. So, well, that was a pretty fun game. That's now going to bring us into game number 2, because we're just messing around with some fun stuff. And look, if you stuck around this far into the video, I always got to say thank you very much for hanging out and sticking around. If you are still here and listening, make sure you hit that like button. It really does help out the channel, and I would appreciate it. Now, we're going up against an interesting squad, so let's go ahead and just jump into it. All right, so here's a fun lead matchup. Check this out. I predict them to lead off with Gliscor. It just feels like what they're going to lead off with. Now, it turns out they do go with the Gliscor. Got the big meaty claws, and I lead Talonflame for this exact reason. I would love to get off a Will-O-Wisp before this thing activates its Toxic Orb, and guess what? Not only do they not go for the Protect, I get the burn off before this thing is able to poison itself, and that's got to be one of the most satisfying starts to a game. That is like the best feeling to do to anything ever, is to either A, knock off a Gliscor's freaking Toxic Orb before it activates it, or straight up burn it, and now it's just got to deal with its attack being halved, and it can no longer heal. So right off the bat, getting huge value from the Talonflame, baby. This thing sets up Stealth Rock, which is unfortunate, but Talonflame doesn't give a damn with wearing our freaking, we got our Tims on out here. So now I can U-turn, I can get a little bit of chip damage on my way out, and knowing that they're not going to click an Earthquake here, it feels like I can pretty safely go into Magneton. Honestly, this Gliscor is just like that, kind of wasted for the entire match. So that is a fantastic start. Now, unfortunately for me, however, they end up going for the knockoff, which, well, that gets rid of my Eviolite. Now I'm just half as bulky. That kind of sucks. But at least I maintain the boots on the Talonflame. And at this point, also, Magneton's still fine. I'm like, you know what? I'm still pretty much a threat offensively here. A Flash Cannon's going to do great, Chip. And I decide, as they probably just click Earthquake here, I'm just going to go ahead and Terra Grass. The best part about this whole situation is, while I do have to use up some resources here, especially like the Terra on Magneton, is Gliscor is a pretty big problem to my team. I do not deal with it super well. So I go for that Terra Grass. Allows me to take a high horsepower to the face. For some reason, Butter doesn't even have hooves, but has the high horsepower. Generally, people run high horsepower on teams that focus on grassy terrain, as Earthquake is hindered by that. But for some reason, I don't think they have any grassy terrain. Regardless, we take that nicely, and now this allows them a revenge switch into the Tinkaton. So, not knowing exactly what the Tinkaton wants to do, I'm just going to stay in and Volt Switch. And as they Thunder Wave, that's kind of unfortunate, but I mean, this Magneton's not supposed to be fast. Because first of all, its ability, it benefits from going second, right? With Analytic, we get a nice little boost to our special attack there. I can hit it with a Volt Switch, which does great damage on my way out. And now I'm looking at this whole matchup thinking, how can I best capitalize on this with one of my setup mons? First of all, I decided to go Oricorio because, as I've seen in the past, if Tinkaton's gonna Thunder Wave, it might just click it against Oricorio, and if I can substitute in front of that, we're going to be in a great spot, especially considering I already have pretty good chip on the thing. So I go for the substitute because it's kind of a no-risk situation. If they do just break it, I guess that's, you know, mostly fine. But the payoff would be huge if they do Thunder Wave. Now, it turns out, however, they are just going to go for the big bonk. And, you know, that is unfortunate. So I tried to bait him into the Thunder Wave. It doesn't quite happen for me, and now I'm not going to be able to really set up in front of the thing. But as this thing continues to eat leftovers, it's at about half health. And honestly, this Oricorio, this time I'm working with a Life Orb set, so I don't have a whole lot of, you know, health to work with here. I decided to just go for a Revelation Dance, honestly. I'm thinking either they swap in, or I just get some decent chip with a Revelation Dance, as it probably won't knock it out. I kind of accepted the fact that this Oricorio is probably not going to be able to set up crazy today. But as I go for the Revelation Dance, Buddy ends up swapping into the Skeledirge, who just gets immediately melted by that. And that is satisfying. I don't know what they expected me to click there, but I will absolutely always take a free dead Skeledirge. So, you know, that feels pretty satisfying. And we get some value out of an Oricorio who was supposed to pretty much be dead. So now they go back into the Tinkaton. They're probably like, what the hell did I just switch into that for? Which is the exact question that I'm asking. But at this point, look, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should save the Oricorio. Do I really need to just let it die here? No, I'm going to end up switching into the Magneton here. Now I'm thinking maybe they T-Wave this time, probably not, considering I substituted earlier. But as I come in without an Eviolite, yeah, it turns out I'm not bulky enough to deal with the Gigaton Hammer. That is going to take care of me. A little bit of an oversight on my end. I go into the Magneton there as a Death Fodder switch in, because now I can go into whatever I want. And it's feeling like a pretty decent opportunity to bring in Clodsire, right? The Tinkaton probably doesn't really stay in. A Gigaton Hammer will still do some pretty good damage, but also I can get up my Stealth Rock. What they're working with in the back is going to be a Heracross, which I'm worried about being a Guts set with Trailblaze setup speed. That could be scary. They also have a Mabostive, who's likely Choice Scarf. And then they've also got an Annihilate, which is always scary. So, as I go Clodsire here, turns out this thing does stay in. They end up going for the Reflect. I was hoping maybe this would bait in something like the Annihilate. But yeah, I get up my Stealth Rock, which is fine. Gonna try to punish some switch in here to at least get some decent chip damage. But behind a Reflect, I'm not that worried about it, right? We see this thing has leftovers. There's no Light Clay. And without a Light Clay, I'm far less concerned about a Reflect. So it does turn out to be probably just dual screens here. We've seen the Thunder Wave and the Gigaton Hammer. So maybe no play rough coverage. But regardless, they end up now going for that Gigaton Hammer. This Tinkaton is not afraid of shit. That does a whole bunch of damage, just splatters some slimy guts all over the place. And as I do hit it with an Earthquake, it's not quite going to be enough to knock it out. Clodsire does take attacks well, mostly on the special side, but he doesn't really specialize on getting great damage there. So Tinkaton is going to be able to stay alive with that Reflect. So unfortunately for them, they can't Gigaton Hammer twice in a row, right? Which feels great because now I'm kind of in range to fully expect them to switch out. Now, expecting them to swap, I go for the Toxic. However, they stay in and they do have the play rough. So Buddy's just got Reflect. And as I Toxic, now I'm over here looking like a fool, glistening in the damn sunlight over here. So they don't swap. I was really expecting maybe a switch into Annihilate. I'm thinking if Annihilate came in and started to set up, while I am unaware Clodsire, it can set up on me if I'm this low of health. So I thought getting a Toxic would have been satisfying. But then I pay the price. And the ultimate price, because now I just get the old bonk of death, and that is going to take care of the Clodsire. So with the Sire out of the way, now I'm looking at things thinking, what I really need to do is conserve Talonflame for, honestly, both of their basically sweepers left, right? They have the Heracross, who doesn't really deal with Talonflame that great. Also, Annihilate doesn't really want to touch it, and I can likely burn it. So what I decide is a little bit of a checkmate situation could just be if I get this Latios to set up. And I know you guys are probably sick of seeing this Dragon Dance Latios, but I've had it on the teams. It's actually really fun. So instead of going for a Dragon Dance, however, I just decided to click the Earthquake here. I don't really want to take a nice little play rough there for no reason. So the Earthquake is going to finish off the Tink, and the Reflect is also out of the way. So down goes the Tinkaton, and now they've got a couple Mons left, right? So first of all, as they go into the Mabostiff, this thing is not only going to threaten being Choice Scarfed, but it's also Intimidate. So I drop my attack immediately, and Latios does not really enjoy that. So I decided to look, if something's going to go for a physical attack here, guess who I'm going into is our freaking boy Talonflame. I can take attacks. If you touch me, you run the risk of being flame-bodied, and Talonflame is just an obvious switch in here. So it turns out, though, the Mabostiff is going to bust out a Terra. It's going to turn out to be Terra Fairy, spoiler alert, but the reason why I'm also not concerned about hard switching into it is without the Stakeout ability, boosting its damage on switch-ins, I'm not really that concerned. So it also turns out they want to go for the now Terra boosted play rough on the Latios. It does have to make contact with the Talonflame. Sadly, I do not get the flame body, unfortunately. But now I know that it's probably Choice Scarfed into the play rough there. So I can capitalize on that opportunity by going ahead and clicking a Will-O-Wisp. If they want to go into the Heracross, it's kind of a situation where they can't really afford to. Heracross does not have any game opening here unless it already has a speed boost. So as I Will-O-Wisp, in comes the Annihilate, and we're just getting some massive burns today because honestly, Annihilate being burnt basically removes all worry that I had about this ghostly bastard. So that feels pretty nice. What's also great about this is I can take any attack from this thing now as long as it doesn't have a whole bunch of crazy Rage Fist boost. Plus, I now have a super effective Brave Bird, and while that's not supposed to kill, I end up getting a lucky critical hit, and that is unfortunate for Buddy because the plan was essentially I would be able to take some recoil there and maybe an attack from the Annihilate and then still have one more Brave Bird left in me, for the Heracross, which I'm kind of worried about, but that's great. We'll absolutely take the crit there. And as they're now able to switch back into the Mabostiff, just it kind of guarantees the fact that it's got to be Choice Scarf at this point. And again, I need the Talonflame, or at least I'm thinking I do, for that Heracross in the back. So essentially, the great part about this Mabostiff here is it's going to need to lock itself into a move. So looking at what I've got left, I can essentially burn a Death Fodder switch in here with the Oricorio, and then just depending on what they want to click there, I can then decide a matchup. So as I bring in the Burb, I do get a little bit destroyed by some Stealth Rock, and it turns out they're going to go for the Thunder Fang. That is going to knock my ass out, but that is fine by me because now you're just locked into a Thunder Fang, which is crazy coverage. But at this point, who's looking like a kind of a game winner in this situation is going to be our boy Sneasler. I got the Golden Nugget Fling Sneasler here, who is honestly, obviously, since this thing is Terra Fairy at this point, I can threaten it with that Dire Claw. But also, as soon as I'm able to fling my Big Nugget, then I'm just going to activate on Bird, and then I'm just faster than Scarf and Mabostiff. So as they do swap here, just in fear of the Dire Claw, I figure it's just going to be good damage on Heracross anyway. Plus, I just naturally outspeed the guy. So Heracross is a tough guy to get in, honestly. You can't really hard switch it into stuff. But as I go for that Dire Claw, I get some big old damage, but also this thing activates its Flame Orb. So with Guts, it's not going to be scary enough unless it already has a speed boost. We know it's not going to be Scarf, so I'm pretty free to go for a Fling here. Now, the reason why I can afford to Fling is because even though it's resisted, I think it should be able to knock the thing out, and it does. But also, that now doubles my speed, getting rid of my item. I was carrying a heavy-ass golden nugget in my pocket, so you can imagine I'm much faster now. I'm at doubled speed, and Sneasler, naturally fast as hell, is definitely going to be able to outspeed the Mabostiff, who is going to at least come in and get an Intimidate. However, I can now go for that Dire Claw. And Sneasler is an unfair mon, man. That's why I've been using this thing as a hilarious kind of like fling and then thief set and then try to fling an item again. Luckily, though, I can end up finishing off the Mabostiff, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be the end of the game there. So I thought that was just an interesting match, and Sneasler coming in clutch there at the end. So we're just out here messing around with mons, having a fun time doing it. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Peace out.